Hello, and welcome to the Recover Yourself workshop. We will be going through the first hour here live on Facebook, YouTube. We're not going live on Facebook. So there's that. So if you're here, congratulations, you have found the most recent, depending on when you found it. This is being recorded or this is being pushed live on the 9th of February, 2021. And I am very excited to be able to present this work. My work is all about the focus of what is it we're recovering to beyond what we're recovering from. The work that I do pushes this idea very deeply because the idea of recovering from sits in this space of looking over our shoulder and grows out of a sense of fear. And recovering from something, meaning that there was something that we did that was bad, or something that we did that we want to stop doing. And of course, that happens throughout our lives. There are things that we want to stop doing all the time. Of course, those things that we're addicted to are harder to quit than other things that are just easier to stop doing. Sometimes it's just easier to stop doing something that isn't as impactful as dopamine production and drugs, alcohol. When we have those real strong connections to things. But when we talk about recovering to, we're talking about what is it and where is it we are going. How are we going to be moving forward? What is it we are trying to accomplish with the work that we're doing? And where is it we're headed? Very often as we get older, many people get stuck in an idea of who they are. And once we have an identity, once we understand who we are in the world, it's very hard to break from that. So when we understand ourselves as a parent and we lose a child or we lose our only child, that could be devastating for the rest of our lives. But when we can understand that things change, we're a little bit more, at least we're prepared more for things to change when we don't stand by an identity so strongly. So today, for anybody that's here for the long haul, purchase tickets for this event, you will get a number of polls issued to you so you can answer those. And we'll have to do that for attendance because especially if you are going to be gaining your CEUs today. So we're going to need you to answer those polls. So I appreciate any help along that because I will not be able to say if you were here or not if you do not answer those polls. And there are going to be three that will be attached to you as an individual, and you will have to answer at least two of those polls in order to get credit and get your CEUs. I understand if you step away, the polls will only be up for about a minute or so. So if you do step away, no big deal. You still have the other two. But if you stepped away for two of the polls, well, not much I can do. Those polls will be happening within the first hour. So if you're here within the first hour, great. And then we will be going into the back and forth in terms of your going through the work of this workshop. The first hour, pardon me, the first hour of this workshop is just going to be covering the topic, and then we go into an exercise, and that exercise is the work that's the most important, especially for those of us that work with people in the field. And when we have clients, we're going to want to make sure that we go through these exercises, not only for ourselves, but possibly for those who are ready to go through the exercise themselves, so that they can continue doing the work beyond working with you. Of course, if we're working with people that have drug and alcohol problems, once they have so much time and once they have, checked the boxes, we can send them on their way. That often hasn't been enough for a lot of people. Of course, if they have a community that they get into, great. That's work that we can do. We can make sure that they have all of the things to set them up for success. However, if the inside of them is just not lining up, that could be problematic. And so we want to really get them in a space of recovering themselves. So we all face burnout and fatigue. This comes back to us. It's tied up in the recovering from, we're always looking over our shoulder, as I mentioned earlier, and that is work that we have to work on as well. Because when we're looking over our shoulder, whether it's for our boss or our supervisor or other counselors or our job, we can put ourselves in a position of over fatiguing our system. When we have high cortisol levels, as we all know, we can just experience high levels of fatigue. And so this idea of recovering ourselves opens that up, and we start opening ourselves up to curiosity. And someone said to me the other day, yeah, I like your idea. It's like, we don't want to get furious, we want to get curious. And that's a wonderful way of looking at it, right? Like if there's anywhere in your life that you're getting furious, that's an opportunity for us to get curious and really start to figure out, well, why am I wasting all of this energy towards something, and really kind of questioning where that's coming from. So the overview of this, we're going to have an hour of fundamental work, then we're going to shut off the sharing, the live share on YouTube, and then we're going to go in and we're going to be able to talk one-on-one a little bit more within our group, and work through the exercise of recovering ourselves. That should take, depending on how much people share and whatnot, should take about an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours at the longest. I want to make sure that I get all of the information in. And this is worth three credit units, and so the length of this can get up to an hour, but will not go over. So I respect your time. Anybody that is here for the workshop will be gaining CEUs, and I'll email those out at the end. Pardon me. And there will be, depending on how many people are here, there will be follow-up calls that'll be available to you. There are less than 10. I usually go ahead and do a 30-minute follow-up call with everybody. More than 10, we go into a raffle sort of situation, but everyone can purchase. If you don't wind up getting one of those, you can purchase a follow-up call, which is 30 minutes at $25 with me, to just kind of talk about what came up during this workshop. This is something you're going to be able to take away to your patients. This is something that you can utilize in your life. It is wide-ranging, and I believe it is worth our time to be here. So we all have given up little parts of ourselves throughout our lives. Once we're born, even before we're born, in utero, we are gathering information about our environment. By gathering that information, we are early in our lives solidifying what we believe the world is like. I was talking with one person not long ago, and her response was double standard. That was how she defined the world around her. And when the world is defined as a double standard, everything you see can become a double standard. And that's difficult to live within, because you can really see double standard. But when we start from a place of, well, if I define everything as double standard, and something I see is a double standard, the first thing I can say is it might not be true. This is where curious comes in, right? This is the difference between asking the question what and asking the question why. Like, what is referring to the double standard, right? And saying, what do I do? Rather than asking the question, why did I assume this was a double standard? Why do I so wholeheartedly believe this is a double standard? And then by getting curious and by getting into a position where we can say, oh, maybe, just maybe, this isn't a double standard. What then, right? What then? What do I do then? Now, being curious instead of getting furious, as I mentioned earlier, like once you're furious, that's it. You're done. Like you can't examine the situation clearly. You've put blinders on and you're looking headlong into the problem rather than asking yourself, well, why is this a problem? And why am I considering this to be a double standard? Under those circumstances, of course, not everybody deals with double standard. This is just about understanding the whole of what we're looking at. So Thank you for attending the Recover Yourself workshop. And we all want to distract ourselves a little bit from now and again. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. We do that, and I want to express, we do that to practice awareness avoidance. We're trying to not be aware of something, and we might not even know that which we are trying to not be aware of, like that thing. We might not even know what that is. If we don't know what we're trying to avoid being aware of, it could seem like we're not trying to avoid anything. But when we try to distract ourselves, we have to assume, this is where curiosity comes in, that there is something that we're trying to avoid feeling or being aware of. The problem with wanting to practice awareness avoidance and constantly moving towards things that make us comfortable is that we're inadvertently asking something external from us to fill our lives with the exact thing that awareness brings, like that internal happiness and joy. Some of these big things, right? These big topics are trust, security, calm, abundance, confidence, safety. And this is by no means an exhaustive, but these are some just big topics that people today have to deal with, right? Confidence. If we go on social media and compare yourself to others all the time, your confidence is being dashed. Like you probably feeling a bit of what we call now as imposter syndrome, and abundance is like everything revolves around money today, right? Like, so it's very difficult to ever feel like you have enough, but you have enough. You are being supported within yourself. I'm currently dealing with having to live in the home of family because I am currently not earning enough money. Do I have abundance issues? Yes. Do I have to be able to be curious about those and be like, wait, I'm being supported. This is okay. Like I'm not. I have to understand where my confidence is, where my safety is, where my abundance is, and how I deal with that. So trust, security, calm, all of these things we often try and look outside, right? Like how many apps are out there to help us be calm? How many products are out there to help us feel secure? How much can we actually trust other people? And when we take those quizzes online and stuff, do we trust those implicitly, or are we trying to not trust, or are we engaging that so we can try and trust something? All of these things have to be examined and looked at through the eyes of awareness. This doesn't mean you spend your whole life sitting and contemplating this. You just kind of be like, hey, I'm stepping out. I'm stepping out of my pardon me. I'm stepping outside of my ability to be present. And so I'm starting to look to other things to help me distract myself. And we're going to talk about those. We don't talk about those as addictions, we talk about those as pacifiers. And as we engage in pacifiers, we will find that behind that, there are stories that we're telling ourselves. And those stories are helping us just stay where we're at and stay focused on who we've been already and the identities that we attach to ourselves. So we want to be able to continue growing all the time. So once again, my name is Martin John, and to recover from is the most important part of recovery. This is for those of us who work with people in recovery. We have to make sure that they get to a place where they're thinking clearly. Clear thinking is at the core of everything that we do. If we're not thinking clearly, we can't tell and we don't know what is going on with us. When we are living under the influence or thinking under the influence of a drug, alcohol, caffeine, if we're under the influence of our job, if we're under the influence of our partner, if we're living under the influence of our parents, under the influence is a great term to utilize and think about how we are not actually thinking clearly. Because thinking clearly is not thinking under the influence of things, not thinking under the influence of the future, not thinking under the influence of the past, but thinking about yourself in the present right now. What is the best situation? What is the best scenario? What is your best response? Now, once you get to a place where you're thinking under the influence, when you're engaging with a situation under the influence of something, that immediately puts you in harm's way because you're not thinking clearly. And thinking clearly is all about being present with yourself right now. So, to focus on what we're recovering from, we associate our recovery with the things we're trying to separate from. So, as we say, okay, we're recovering from A, B, or C, all of a sudden we're leaving that behind. The further we get from it, the more distance we have between ourselves and that thing. So if we're leaving cocaine, the more time we have away from cocaine, the more we can celebrate, but faulty memory starts to play a part in our relationship. I read something on Reddit the other day that said, I haven't drunk in 6 months, but I my relationship with it is changing because I'm not thinking about it properly and I'm being coaxed into drinking again. And that is, in my opinion, the whole problem with only having a conversation of what we're recovering from and not knowing what we're recovering to, or not even talking about what we're recovering to, or just assuming that is that's part of someone's recovery. One of the ways we can visualize recovery is one of two. We can put a pick in the ground and we grab that rope and we take our time and we count how much time there is. The thing is we're still tethered to that thing, that date, that cocaine, that alcohol, that whatever. And maybe that rope becomes long enough that we can just hold on to it, not even see the anchor, not even see the problem, but know that that's there. And that is when we start talking about, oh, your addiction is out in the parking lot doing push-ups, right? That sort of conversation. But we also look at recovering from as being like putting down. So I'm holding on to all of this addiction and I'm going to let it go. Now my hands are empty. The problem with empty hands is we want to fill them. We're comfortable with having them filled. And what we're most comfortable with having them filled with is our DOC, our drug of choice. And when we become so uncomfortable that we need to put something in our arms, we're going to turn to our drug of choice, and this brings upon relapse. So long-term recovery, not without relapse, but long-term recovery, is really born out of an understanding of what we're recovering to, understanding that we are the thing. Now, I don't care if you're recovering from and you utilize your kids or utilize your partner or utilize whatever to get you clean and sober. Once you have that, like, you have to make it about you, right? We all know that. We all know that we have to make our recovery about ourselves. We have to want it. If we don't want it, well, what ends up happening is the thing that we are pitting or trusting is going to be stable for our recovery is going to end up unstable, and it's going to destabilize our recovery. So long-term recovery is born out of understanding that we are recovering to something. To recover ourselves is work that we do to strengthen and expand our lives. It is not stagnant. There is a reason for it. We want to recover ourselves so we can continue challenging ourselves and we can continue being comfortable with feeling uncomfortable. When we know who we are, when we understand that we are recovering a wholeness within ourselves, well, that in turn gives us strength to be able to be uncomfortable. We don't have to continue escaping when we feel problems with trust or confidence, because we know that that's going to change and we're going to continue growing that, and that there is a cycle that brings us up. Right? Like, we might feel confident one day, feel a little less confident the next day, and then we feel confident again the next. Recovering ourselves launches lives that are self-guided. So this means the need for AA goes away. That doesn't mean that you leave AA. I did, but that's not the answer, right? The need for a therapist goes away. The desire to be a part of it may be to have a therapeutic practice, or to be able to engage in a therapeutic relationship with someone, that doesn't necessarily have to go away. But the need to do it, you are self-guiding yourself. When your therapist says, oh, I think this, you can say, you know what, I think this is better for me. And then have a conversation around that. Are you thinking clearly? Because if you are, then you can answer those questions yourself. When you're thinking under the influence of things, fear, drugs, alcohol, any of those things, you will quickly want other people to answer your questions for you, guide you in a way that is that you are unable to do because you're not thinking clearly. So this ceases the incessant search for answers outside of yourself once you're self-guided. Being self-guided, living a life that's self-guided is huge for each and every one of us. As therapists, as counselors, as individuals that are going after, even as police officers, I'm going to be talking with police officers a couple times this year. And one of the big things I want to make sure that they take away from it is that we want to be able to live a life that is that we are so sure we're doing the right thing that we don't ever go home and bring our work home with us. Fatigue. That is investing way too much energy and way too much of your life, because your life has to be about recovering too, whether you've recovered from anything or not. If your life is about your work, well, then you're living under the influence of your work. So we want to make sure that we're not living under the influence of things, because as we live under the influence of things, our cortisol levels are going to go crazy, because those things can stress us out if they become unhinged. And anything can become unhinged. We want to make sure that we don't. So moving into the first part, there is a desire today to connect with ourselves on a deeper level. And that is shown in memes and pop culture everywhere, right? Men aren't the same as men. Like, the idea of what a man is today is not the same as it was when I was a boy. So that creates a big gap in how we understand the world. Because if you were born, or if you're in an institution, or if you're in a group or a fraternity like police, who understand men in one way, or understand how you're supposed to act in one way, well, when you personally get a desire to act in a different way, you may go against that in order to appease the group that you are living under the influence of. So that desire to be more open, the desire to open our definitions of things, so we're not so hell-bent on understanding and identifying as a small thing in a box, even if it's a bigger box than you used to be. All of those groups, even AA, Smart Recovery, all of these things, if you've written a rule down, well, then that becomes problematic over time. Yes, there are truths, but you can't necessarily predict what those truths are going to be in the moment. So that desire forces us to add the conversation of recovering to the recovery conversation. And that's what we're here to do today. When we speak about recovering from, we define things as living without. We immediately begin, but when we start to speak of recovering to, we immediately begin to live within ourselves, within the whole. And it's all about thinking clearly. Due to the nature of our consumer culture, many things attempt to give us a sense of depth while only offering escape from the depth that we can achieve. Now, this is going to be a little video clip of a woman that I interviewed for my podcast, Recover Yourself. This is Ruby Warrington, who wrote the book Sober Curious. And she really encapsulates this idea of clarity in a very quick and beautiful little clip.
It's not so much that I'm pro abstinence, I'm pro clarity. Whatever it takes to have real, true clarity of thought and mind and intention, that's what I am pro, because I think there are so many things in our world today that are set up and designed to steal our attention and to shape our opinions and to shape who we think we are. And we have to be super vigilant in this society that we live in now to retain clarity. And I think any substance, any behavior that kind of clouds our connection to ourselves ultimately gets in the way of clarity.
Clarity. That's at the core of everything we're going to be talking today. We want to make sure that we're living in a clear way. And when we're not, we may be engaging in pacifiers, or, as we mentioned earlier, living under the influence of something. So let's look at some pacifiers. And I want you guys to consider, what of these things do you guys utilize as pacifiers? Drugs, alcohol, of course, those are huge addictions. So of course, those are pacifiers for a lot of people. Sometimes they get out of control and they become addictions, but we're going to look at these as pacifiers. I mean, many of us may not, I do, but many of us may not have problems with alcohol, may not have problems with alcohol, right? But we may still use alcohol as a pacifier. We may even use marijuana as a pacifier. Is that a drug or is it whatever? You know, like, I don't want to kind of get into classifications or judgments about what one thing is or another. I mean, some of us may just have, may not have a problem with crack or meth, but, every now and again, it's real nice to fucking hit the pipe. So that's cool. All right. Is that a pacifier? What is it you're trying to escape? What are you pacifying from? Many of us drink caffeine. I want to bring this one up because it's a real important one, especially within our culture. How many of you chose to drink coffee today? Just think to yourself. Now, how many of you actually chose to drink coffee today, or made the decision many, many, many years ago and just executed that decision today? And the reason I bring this up is because if you're not actually choosing to drink coffee today, meaning, oh, well, if you go to bed and there's no coffee in the house, no big deal, because you might not drink coffee tomorrow. If that's cool, well, then it's not a pacifier. But if you went to bed knowing that you were going to drink coffee today, then you're not allowing yourself to be aware of your growth and change. Because it's possible you woke up today as a non-coffee drinker, but because of your habits, you continued to be a coffee drinker. Now, maybe you woke up 15 years ago and weren't a coffee drinker, but got over that real quick. And now you just shove that down and don't question it. The question is, why? This is what recovering to involves. Because if you're drinking coffee every day, you're living under the influence of coffee, of caffeine, let's say. I mean, because coffee, like, you can get your caffeine from anywhere. But if you're trying to avoid the fact that you're tired, this means you need to sleep more, possibly. This means you need to stress less, possibly. This means we have this culture around coffee, all of which revolves around not being aware of how tired we are, of how overworked we are, of how, and all of that has to do with our culture. And maybe it's okay. Maybe it's fine for you. It wasn't for me. So I now drink decaf when I have coffee. And I might not have it every day. Television is another one. Shows. I mean, I struggle all the time with the idea of, like, oh, I can't sleep. Let me put on a show. And then I'll fall asleep during that. Because when I was a kid, I heard, like, my bedroom was outside of the living room. And so my parents would watch the news at night and I would hear this. And so, like, even like not watching it, just turning my back on it and listening, or having the radio on, all of these sorts of things are things I did. And that is me avoiding my racing mind at the end of the day. Social media is another place that we could, like, how many times do you pick up your phone, don't even know why you're doing it, or open up Facebook or Instagram or Pinterest and just start doom scrolling, as they say. Right? Shopping, gaming, these have, been flirted with, adding to the DSM-5, and over, workaholism is something that has been really bad. But when we look at where that came from, like the greedy 80s, like it's really hard to know, um, when we're checking out. But we got to know, if are we going to work to not face something. We want to be able to look at that. We want to be able to look at all these things: sex, relationships, multitasking, clutter, and cleaning. All of these things are definitely places where we could be pacifying ourselves. Now, this isn't, once again, an exhaustive list. We could all, like, there's all sorts of stuff. I just want you guys to understand there are places where we pacify. And when we pacify, we're checking out. By checking out, why are we checking out? We want to be curious about those things. We want to be curious about, where it's taking us. Because if we're checking out for a reason, it'd be good to know that reason. We don't have to stop checking out right away, but just start asking the question and start looking at where it brings us. So where are you not showing up? Every day we have to step away from one thing or another. And although this is normal, are we taking note of the things that cause us to want to step away from what we're doing? Why are we engaging in our pacifiers? Why are we engaging? Like, why am I watching television? Why am I drinking coffee? Why am I doing these things? Are they things I want to be doing, or are they things that I am just doing because I don't want to be doing something else? Can I work when I work and literally do nothing other than be with myself at another time? Of course, there's so much that we can utilize around us that can take us away from, like, I spent probably an hour on YouTube yesterday. Why? Because I didn't want to do what I was doing. And then I didn't want to, but that doesn't matter. It's just a matter, it's a matter of being curious and knowing and being aware of where you're spending your time. Because as you're aware of it, you will open up more and more to that which is causing you to step away. That's this idea of curiosity over judgment, right? We want to take a stance around how we're going to talk to ourselves. Because if we talk to ourselves from a place of judgment, if we talk to ourselves from a place of punitive kind of criminal justice, rather than a restorative process where we can actually have a conversation and a dialogue with ourselves, well, if we're being judgmental, are we going to be responsive to that? No, we're just going to tell ourselves we're bad, and we're going to probably continue doing that thing. But if we want to step away from it, if we want to grow from it, if we want to live a life that is self-guided, we have to have a good relationship with ourselves. This means we have to become aware of what it is we're doing, and what it is we're choosing, and when we're choosing not to, right? Like, where are we choosing something that we would not, under slightly different circumstances, personally endorse for ourselves, right? Like, there are those moments where we put on those blinders and we can't focus on anything else. We get triggered. We put on blinders, and we do things that, under slightly different circumstances, we wouldn't personally endorse, right? We wouldn't personally say, yes, the best answer is to yell at this person. The best answer is to get upset. The best answer is to fight, right? Like, when we are not in a triggered state, maybe we don't have to fight or flee. Maybe we can stand there and just kind of say, I'm being attacked. What is the best situation? What is the best response under these circumstances that I would personally endorse, that I would want to do in hindsight, right? Oftentimes when we're in the middle of it, we can't see, the forest through the trees, as they say. So awareness being at the core of all this, well, we want to make sure that we're noticing when we're checking out, or where we're not choosing to engage. This helps us recover ourselves. It's just awareness alone. Awareness alone is going to help us see what we're doing. Because, if we're not aware of why we're doing things, if we're not curious, about why we're doing things, then we let those things get out of hand. We let those things just open up and take from us because we are not engaging in things that are that we would personally endorse, that we would say this is the exact way I want to be responding to situations like this. Maybe it's with our partner, maybe it's with our our family-in-law, maybe, who knows, but we often don't respond the way we would really want to respond. And when we don't, that can hurt us, in the long run and in the short game. So this is all about perceptions. A lot of times we think we know what's going on, but what ends up happening is it's actually just a perception that we're carrying, and we're filling in the gaps, right? We fill in the gap between our subconscious and our conscious. Our subconscious mind might be saying, oh, he said that because he's trying to get back at me. But the reality is he said it without thinking about maybe. The reality is he said it without thinking about it at all. And your perception was he wanted to get back at you. There's a gap between how we consciously want to respond to a situation and how we subconsciously may be coaxed into responding. To close that gap, we must become aware of how it's happening around us and how it points back, as to how what is happening around us points back to us. There's that old saying, once you point at someone else, you have three fingers pointing back at you. That's kind of what this gets at. If there is anything in the world that we don't like, then there's something about us we don't like. So if you can look out at the world and say, I don't like this, I don't like that, I don't like this, then we have to bring that back and say, well, why don't you like this? Why don't you like, politics, or why don't you like this situation, or why don't you like how someone treated you? And then really get into your gut. And we're going to go through an exercise today for those of us that are here for the long haul. We're going to go through an exercise about how to really attach ourselves to what our gut is saying, so that we understand how that relates back to us. Very often, people around us can get incensed about, or frustrated, or angry, or furious, right, about things that we are like, yeah, I don't care. Just, it doesn't affect me. And if it does, like, and I'm not talking about things that don't affect you. It doesn't make you emotionally distraught. Here's a situation that I'm watching. I'm not emotionally distraught by it. I wonder why, right? So understanding those things and understanding what causes you to respond and what doesn't, and if someone is responding in your periphery, and are they going to force you to respond? Are you then living under the influence of that? Are you not? These are things that awareness can bring up. So there's two states of mind that this relates to. We talk about the brain as wanting to respond as different networks. Different networks in your brain are active at different times. So these two networks that we're going to talk about right now are the salient network and the default mode network. These two are not exactly opposites, but they are not online at the same time. The salient network, salient means to focus on a single object. And default mode, default obviously is just the standard mode. You and I right now are in a default mode. You can focus on me, but you probably hear things in the background. You probably kind of notice there's sun. You might see a change in the quality of the video here and there because of it's digital, and all sorts of things are possible. So what the default mode network is where you're at right now. You can be aware of a lot of different things. You can bring in information from different areas. You can listen to me. You can pay attention. You can also drink your coffee. Now, if you were to get triggered, and we all feel this, but what happens is we get blinders on. As soon as we get triggered, we get blinders on. We can feel, if we think, hey, the last time I got triggered, I was only able to focus on the person who triggered me. I was only able to focus on that which was triggering me. And as I live my life, that stays the focus. I'm not focusing on my driving. I'm not focusing on my talking. I'm not, like everything is only kind of half measured because my focus is really honed at that thing which triggered me. This is like a gazelle on a field, right? Everything's cool and fine. I got my attention on a lot of different things. I'm eating, I'm eating the hay and I'm kind of paying attention to a number of different things, my tribe or like predators and other stuff. And as soon as I start to see a lion start to run, everything gets blinded, boom, and I'm running. I'm not worried about digesting food. I'm not worried about picking up food. I'm not worried about other people in my tribe. I'm worried about me. I'm gonna go toward my tribe and make sure that we are safe. I'm worried about me and my safety, plus that of the group because that's all connected. Um, but I'm not focused on a wide variety of things. This is very, very narrow, and it's all focused on that attack. And so when you feel attack, boom, you put your blinders on and you are stuck in this salient network. What we want to be able to do is get through a salient network and get curious about it. I want to say, why did I put my blinders on? Right? Because obviously this isn't a lion, right? We're not, our lives aren't at risk, but there are beliefs, like especially if this might be our boss or it might be our partner, that if something changes, my life will be at risk. No, that's not how it works anymore. Yes, you may get a divorce. Yes, you may lose your job. Yes, all of these things may be possible, but you are still safe. So we want to be able to break from that and become aware of what's causing us to put our blinders on. What's causing us to not like something in the world, to not like what they said, not like what they're doing. We see this everywhere right now with the internet and the whole, Trump's followers and everything like that. Like they are triggered and incensed by things that we are not. And if they can stop and be curious about why they're being incensed, why they're being so angry, why those things are happening, they will quickly start to recover themselves. And they may have to do that in prison. They may not. I don't know. I don't know how it all works for them. But switching from that salient to a default mode, making sure that we're aware of when that happens, because you might be living your life with your blinders half on all the time. And if you have that on, you will be incensed by even being suggested to that you are not focused on the reality of things. So we want to make sure that we close that gap, right? We close that gap between what we're being coaxed to think by our subconscious and our default, and get into a wider spectrum of being okay with things around us, into a default mode. So for those of us that are professionals, we do want to talk a lot about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, not a lot, but I do want to address it because this conversation that you and I are having is not for everybody. I'd like it to be, but there are people who cannot see it, right? Like there are people that we talk to that are unable to see beyond themselves and beyond what their perceptions agree to. In terms of Maslow's hierarchy, we need to make sure that the people that we're talking to are at least within love and belonging, and can be said they are thinking clearly. They have to be thinking clearly. If they are not thinking clearly, if they are in a space where nothing is going to change, if they are in a space where everything around them has to contribute to, their betterment, this is problematic. This is a space where nobody can think broadly. So we want to make sure that they're able to think broadly when they are looking for physical space, when they are looking for clean water and air and stuff. We can plant seeds and say, look, this isn't going to be here forever, and start them moving towards a space of thinking clearly. But really, we want to maintain our conversation around recovering from. We want to maintain our conversation around like what the positives are that they're experiencing right now, and get them to a place where they can at least start to experience group dynamics and love and support. If they're not there, This sort of conversation will confuse them and allow them to return to their drugs of choice or their pacifiers or whatever it is that they utilize. So want to just make sure that that's stated. We will be shutting this off from the live shortly and moving into the exercise, and we'll start with triggers. So I want to leave you guys on the YouTube live with a couple questions that you can ask yourself in order to locate triggers. Where are the choices that you're making or not making? Similar to the caffeine reference we made earlier, the coffee reference we made earlier, about like, are you making the choice to drink coffee every day, or are you executing a trigger? Are you executing a decision that you made a long time ago? When do you hide? When I say hide, it's like, you know, it's very often that we don't want to talk about like like for men, for me, you know, like I don't want to talk about my porn usage, right? Like, so there are times when I'm engaged in an activity, or I'm engaged in a conversation where I don't want that part of me exposed. Well, if I'm hiding that, well, then I'm ashamed of that. And if I'm ashamed of that, I have to look at that within myself, right? Like, what else makes me hide? Like, do I hide my diet? Do I hide eating certain things? Do I not want people to know? You know, I talked to somebody one time, and you know, during Halloween they had like candy out, and he would take one, but when, you know, like when someone wasn't looking, he might take another and put it in his pocket. So he's hiding that aspect. So he has a little shame about it, and that's fine. There's no problem with having shame about it. But the question then is, why? Well, why am I hiding? Who or what gets us angry, and why? Like, so this is this could be an individual. Like, why does that individual make me angry? Sometimes we can have a friend tell us one thing, and our partner told us the same exact thing 2 weeks prior, and we listened to our friend and not our partner. That's going to make our partner upset, like whatever, like all of these sorts of things. But why does that one person make me angry? Why do I listen to this one person and not that other person? What could possibly happen that if anybody did it, I would get upset? Those are things. When do we put on those blinders? When do we move into a salient network? What happens when we're taken out of our structured day? Like, how do we access that? What happens to us? Like, what is the conversation that we're having in our gut when someone takes us out of our structured day? How do we respond when we or others don't meet our expectations? Is there a conversation that we have with ourselves that states that? Is there a conversation that we have, and what does that conversation look like? How does that conversation evolve, and what is the core message that conversation has for us? So for those of you that are on the live, we're going to be cutting off shortly. Think about those questions. Think about like what it is that makes you respond in those ways. Then you can, we're going to be doing a lot of writing exercise. We're going to be writing out our triggers, the stories behind those triggers, and the experience that we have. And then we're going to be going into some other writing assignments and stuff. So if you wanted to try and continue this work, you can utilize this as a framework at the end of all of this. This is all about recovering yourself. This is all about getting to the point of understanding that which I'm experiencing out in the world is being influenced by something, is the only thing that's being influenced by myself. Because when we understand that it's only influenced by myself, then I'm not a victim. And when I am not a victim, I can control the situation. So please join me next time. Next Tuesday, I'll be doing this again, 10 a.m. Central Time. You can go to Eventbrite, look for Recover Yourself, Martin John, and or NADAC CEUs, and I will be happy to have you on the group next time. For those of us that are here for the entirety, I am going to be switching everybody off and coming back to you shortly. Thank you so much. Have a great day for those of you